The following program is made possible in part by grants from the Miles Kimball Company, the Wisconsin National Life Insurance Company, the Wisconsin Educational Television Network, and KWSU-TV, Pullman, Washington.
Mr. Report, Mr. Boris Report, Mr. Chenard, Mr. Jerry Chenard, please come to a white courtesy telephone, United Airlines.
This program is not about O'Hare, the busiest airport in the world. It's not about ticket lines or flight numbers or baggage claims. It's not about what most of us think of as flying. This program is not about people who fly because they have to. It's about people who fly because they love to. Whitman Field, Oshkosh, Wisconsin. For 1 week each year, this is the busiest airport in the world. Each summer, the Experimental Aircraft Association, the EAA, holds a fly-in convention. 350,000 people make it the biggest flying event in the world. It's an amazing collection of flying hardware, experimentals and home builds, antiques and classics, warbirds, and aerobatics. But the Experimental Aircraft Association is made up of people, not airplanes. The pilots are the real stars, and they'll tell their own stories. They'll be the Pink Baroness and the Red Devils. You'll meet a World War I flying ace and a wing walker. You'll hear what it's like to keep 60,000 planes from bumping into each other, and what to do when your engine falls out in midair. You'll see aerobatic pilots do everything from a snap roll to a palm tree split. There'll be other pilots who spend their spare time, their savings, and their energy to carry on an affair in the air. Paul Poberezny has over 20,000 hours flying time in 350 types of aircraft. He's founder and head of the EAA.
The EAA convention is a gathering of aviation enthusiasts from all over the world who are interested in the design, construction of aircraft, restoration of antique aircraft, aircraft maintenance, workshops, welding, good fellowship. There are over 8,000 amateur-built airplanes flying in the United States today, and over 20,000 aircraft under various stages of construction. You'll note the grounds here are immaculate. The attitude of the people here is tremendous. They come from all over the world, and we are known for our cleanliness and our high standards.
Now, all those conventioneers may not be so well behaved, but at least one of them, Professor Bob Lyjak of the University of Michigan, gets more excitement for 10 minutes in the afternoon than he could in a whole night of hell raising in Oshkosh.
Having been a university professor and sometimes spending the usual 50-minute hour and only having 40 people that you can in some way try to communicate something to, but having 50,000 people, for the most part, who lead much duller lives than I do, and making them, for perhaps a short period of time, like 10 minutes, forget about the fact that they have to get up tomorrow morning and go out to make a living at whatever their jobs are, that fascinates me. There are a number of times when I will get into my airplane on a Tuesday afternoon on a beautiful day and fly on out to an area which it is possible to do aerobatics and go up to 3,000 feet and fly and feel much like I did 19 years ago when I was just beginning to fly. And it's a very relaxing and an enjoyable type of thing. There are certain days, certain cloud formations that when one finds himself amongst them, he sort of realizes that maybe there will never be even another set of eyes who will view exactly the same cloud formation that he has from that given vantage point. Airshow flying in itself can be extremely exciting. I enjoy very much entertaining people. But a large part of it is even flying to the air show over the new routes, seeing parts of the country that one has never seen. I travel all the way as far northwest as Saskatchewan and as far south as Florida. And it's sort of a way of also seeing the country, so to speak, roll beneath you. And it's all of these things combined. It's not only that 12 minutes before the crowd where you are down at 30-foot altitude above the ground with the smoke on. The thing about being a professional performer is you try to make a maneuver look extremely dangerous, and yet, because you have done it a great number of times, you leave yourself some sort of an out. However, I would never convince myself that it's impossible for me to die in an airplane crash. That's, of course, within the realm of possibility. I think airshow flying, for the most part, especially today in the modern era, is done by pilots who are beginning to become much more analytic about it, that they do not consider themselves daredevils. No work of research and mathematics of mine is going to end up being seen 25 or 30 years from now. I think I'm very realistic, and I'm competent, but I'm not one of the best. Whereas in aerobatic flying and airshow flying, I don't hold myself second to anyone. I certainly think in terms of technical matters and being totally analytic, there's a great deal of that. Will the airplane do it? What should the entry speed be? What roll rate should I use? Will I be able to maintain flying speed long enough in order to perform the maneuver? But really the objective is to come up with something that you're tickled pink, that it's working out very well, and you're not the only one who's really getting a kick out of it. There are a lot of other people who are also getting a kick out of it.
And a first thing that is very urgent thing for Charlie Jacobs to the announcer stand. Charlie Jacobs.
Bob Lyjak's plane is an antique, and that's important to him. But it's more important that he can fly aerobatics with it. Many pilots, though, get as much out of restoring old planes as flying them. Any plane built before 1946 is considered an antique. It's a classic if built between 1946 and 1956. Most of the antiques at Oshkosh come from one or two plane families. The largest collection is at the Rhinebeck Aerodrome in New York. Dave Fox has spent 20 years helping Cole Palin restore and fly his old planes.
The people that are restoring these antiques have got to be people who are dedicated to craftsmanship. The beautiful part of it is that they not only restore it to flying condition, but restore it to its absolute original configuration, including the detailing of the paint finish and things of this nature, which require so many hours of labor. To the uninitiated, they are not visible. But to those of us who know, those are the things that make the difference between just restoring the flight status and restoring to its original condition.
As though we went to the cemetery quite often in those days because planes came apart in the air. I saw the general's son march, as a matter of fact, 8th March, looping in his training, and the wings come off. Well, what are you going to do in a case like that? So what we did, we went to the funeral with a dirge and a slow march, or slow march, and we came back singing the latest ditty from Broadway, because you had to keep the spirits up, and that's the way we learned to fly.
A. Raymond Brooks returned from World War I a flying ace and a believer in the future of aviation. He stayed in the Army Air Corps, stationed in Texas.
I received an order at 3 o'clock in the morning at Kelly Field. I had the first pursuit group at that time. And the order said I was to take a bevy of DH-4s down to the border. Well, imagine me running the pursuit group with SC-5As, having an order at 3 o'clock in the morning to take some DH-4s down to stop some fracas at Laredo on the Rio Grande. Well, that miffed me, and I tried to get out of it, but they said orders are orders, so I went. When we got down there, the general, the colonel in charge of the fort, McIntosh, told me that we were trying to stop the Mexicans from having one of their nice little revolutions, and would we please see to it that they wouldn't fire in our direction so the bullets would come into our new Laredo instead of the old Laredo in Mexico. So we contrived to have dummy bombs with black powder, which gave a good smoke, and we made little parachutes with Latinized notices, go ahead and have your little revolution, but don't fire in our direction. And it worked. But the beautiful part of that particular affair was that it was so hot, and we had no air conditioning in these Liberties. And so we flew a great deal in our BVDs, and at the same time we were supposed to take some pictures across the river. And if we'd ever had forced landings over there under those circumstances, it would have been quite awkward in more ways than one, because we weren't supposed to be taking pictures, we weren't supposed to be there.
It's very interesting flying these old airplanes. At Hammondsport last year, for a week, each day I flew 6 airplanes, and each airplane had a different set of control systems. The Hanrio, for instance, the left hand left and right is wing warp, right hand fore and aft is elevator, and then rudders, and no throttle. Got a coup button, of course, because the rotary doesn't have any throttle.
Yeah. Well, the beautiful part of it is Dave Fox is a pilot's pilot, and he flies everything. And some of the weird contraptions that I've seen you in down there at Rhinebeck, I have to believe myself by looking at some that I see here, and they fly just as well.
The Kreitz twins from Waukesha, Wisconsin, started flying 50 years ago. Dale, on the left, can hold his own when it comes to swapping flying stories. But no one can top Dean when he tells about going up with a student pilot back in the 30s and having the engine fall out of the plane.
He pulled the throttle back and everything was nice and all at once bang. There was like I thought we'd hit somebody in the air. And the airplane started for right straight up. Of course, he let me have it right away. And when I got a hold of it, we were straight up. All it did was make a wing over. Came back down, not knowing what had happened yet. And I got the plane, kept it under control, and a pretty steep glide, and found if I could still control and fly it. And the thing flew just like flying a piece of cardboard in a stiff wind. There was no stability up or down at all. And time that we didn't have much time to get a field, and I picked out a field and brought it in and landed and kept the thing right down near the ground. And I just kept pushing it, eased back on a stick, and then eased the head on it until I could hold it to the ground, and I ran out of stick, and the thing made a kind of a sharp dip and then settled down and turned around.
Did you ever find the engine?
And then, well, after I jumped out quick and got out of the cockpit to see what happened, and the pilot, the student says, "What happened?" He says, "We lose some cowlings?" I says, "No, you get out. We don't even have an engine." He says, "He don't believe it." He got out and looked at it, and he fainted. He put her fainted. He said, and we found the engine in the cemetery. And the only way we found it, because we were looking around for some parts, we were looking around to see if we could find some fellows was out there, and he said, "Did you see anything around here, an airplane?" He says, "Yeah, an airplane went by just a little while ago." And he said it threw out some flowers. And he says, and I said, "Well, that's about what it is. It looks like the cowlings that they saw." The engine landed about 100 feet from the main building there, Memorial Airport. In Milwaukee.
Just handling it the way he did there, why making a hammerhead stall was the only way you could keep it from going on his back. He just give it a turn, and then he brought it back and got it into a steep glide.
You know, and there always a little comment come up. You sit around and a bunch of pilots and talking, and they're telling about, he says, "I lost an engine on takeoff." I says, "What? Did it actually fall out?" He says, "No, it didn't fall out, it just quit." I said, "You don't have any problem at all."
Watch for Kirby as a Red Devil, longitude of the vehicle, side by side, snap roll.
Gene Soucy, Charlie Hillard, Tom Poberezny, they're the Red Devils. The planes look like antiques, but actually they're modern pit specials designed for aerobatics. Sometimes Gail Turner of Belmont, California teaches 3rd grade. But other times she puts on her jumpsuit, cranks up her flybaby, and becomes the Pink Baroness.
I built the airplane in my living room and garage. It was cold, and it's my house, and it's warmer and softer on the rug in the living room, so that's where I built it. And in April of '76, I test flew my own airplane myself, which was one of the biggest joys on Earth. To take off and be up in the air in your own creation is something like what the movie Waldo Pepper showed. Of course, once I was up there, then I had to land her. That was the next project. But luckily, she behaves well, and we get along, and she landed herself. I have no VOR equipment. That means I have no navigation equipment, so I just follow the roads. I flew it all the way from San Francisco to Oshkosh by myself. It took me 5 days, 29 air hours, and 22 fuel stops.
One of those stops was Casper, Wyoming, where threatening weather reports kept most pilots down. But Gail had to see for herself.
Land at Douglas. So off I went in my little pink airplane, and there was a friend in a 150 that I had just met there that followed me, but when we hit rain, he turned around and went back. And probably not so wise, but I did it anyway. I went down under because I had a ceiling. I could get under it. I just got wet. So I landed at Douglas, sopping wet, and got the plane tied down, which you get wetter. And just about that time, in came a beautiful red Stinson. And it's a couple from Oregon that I had met at Casper. And he said he wasn't going to fly in that bad weather. So when I went over to see him, I said, I thought you weren't going to be here. He said, well, if a broad in a pink airplane can do it, I can do it.
Flying an airplane is one thing. Building one is something else. None of these planes was built on an assembly line. They were built in garages and basements and anywhere the owners could find room. Any plane that carries passengers for money must go through an expensive testing process by the Federal Aviation Administration. That's impractical for a do-it-yourselfer, so planes like these get an experimental rating. But they still have to meet rigid FAA construction standards. Ralph Seeley, 290 Washington.
Essentially, I think there are two kinds of people involved with building experimental airplanes. One kind is trying to get airborne inexpensively. The cheapest factory-produced airplane today is I believe, $18,000, and it doesn't fly much like an airplane. The other kind of person is fed up with the fact that no matter how much money he's got to buy a factory-produced airplane, it still doesn't fly like an airplane. A lot of people, I think, get started building little smaller airplanes in the first category. All they're interested in is getting airborne and doing it cheaply or inexpensively and safely, and then they discover that flying is fun and that the higher performance airplanes are more fun, and somewhere in the middle they cross that dividing line into seeking performance instead of just economics. Some people fly for status, and some people fly because they just love to fly, and other people fly because an airplane is a convenient tool. It gets them somewhere either that's hard to reach with anything else, or that the airplane gets them there much faster. I fly because I love to fly. Every time I see Mount Rainier turning pink in the sunset, I just know that whatever was wrong all of a sudden turns right. Everybody's got something like that, whether it's sailing boats or racing stock cars, listening to the symphony. Take an airplane and to be flying along at 1,000 feet and and a few seconds later be upside down at 2,000 feet and then back down at 1,000 feet, right side up, is an experience that is unique to people who fly airplanes. I have an airplane which I bought for about $4,000, which was built in 1946. The least expensive airplane coming off the factory line today, which is a comparable two-place airplane, costs right around $18,000. That was last year's prices. My 1946 airplane goes faster, it carries more weight, it uses less runway, it burns less fuel, and intangibly it's more fun to fly. It just makes you wonder what's happened in 30 years of aviation engineering, and people that are seriously asking what has happened in 30 years of aviation engineering are designing and building home-built airplanes.
One of the heroes of home-built aircraft is a guy on a pension from Hemet, California.
I had this dream when I got out of the Air Force that I wanted to set one little teeny record just to get in a book with Lindbergh and Doolittle and all these famous guys.
On his second attempt, Don Taylor became the first person to fly around the world in a home-built.
And I couldn't find the airplane I wanted. And I looked for 6 months at commercial airplanes, which are very fine, but they're not specialized enough. So I met John Thorpe, who designed this, and he wouldn't sell me the prints. He wouldn't sell me the airplanes. And finally I convinced him I wasn't quite as big a kook as I was, and this was the one I wanted to do it in.
The first flight was harder on me because I didn't really know. You never know everything about your husband, and he had such a dream and such an ambition to make the record that I didn't know whether he might take too big a chance. But when he called me from Japan saying that the weather was so bad he couldn't go and he was going to ship it home, then I knew that he was a pilot first and a dreamer second, and that he wouldn't do anything that would risk his life.
Well, it's proven, if nothing else, the durability and the goodness and the efficiency of what they call homemade airplanes. These are outstanding aircraft. Mine and all the rest of them, they're just great. And it also proves that a small aircraft, period, can conquer the world.
Performance means more to Don Taylor than Texan Ray Heggie. Ray spent 9 years building a sawed-off little biplane that does show a sense of humor.
As you can see, the airplane isn't very heavy. It only weighs 482 pounds. It's built largely of salvage material. The only new material is the tubing in the fuselage. The rest is airplane parts that I'd picked up here and there over a period of years. The engine is 65 horsepower Continental, and cruising speed of the machine is about 120 miles an hour, and the top speed is 140. And I've had it to 15,000 feet. The propeller, of course, is my own design and construction. In fact, that's all I do is make propellers. Chuparosa means hummingbird in Spanish. When I was building the machine down there in West Texas, I was always asked what I was going to name it. And I said, I don't know. Well, a rancher friend of mine said, why don't you call it Chuparosa? I said, what does that mean? He said, it means hummingbird. I said, that's it. And while we were building the airplane in the shop, a hummingbird flew into the shop one day. He flew all around in there until he was exhausted. He finally sat down on top of the drill press, and I just picked him up in my hands and carried him out to the door, and he sat there and looked at me with the little black eyes. When he got good and ready, he took off and flew off. But this, incidentally, is my one and only effort in oils. And people, knowledgeable people, have accused me of being an artist, and I don't, but that's it. It's not very big. It built for me. I only weigh 115 pounds, and the airplane is A normal-sized person couldn't even get in it.
Ray, what are all these funny little buttons in here? Panic button and stuff like that. Tell us about that.
Mostly conversation pieces. The panic button is just a conversation piece. It does exactly nothing. And this Navibird here is an honorarium given me by Oklahoma City chapter. It's one of 2 instruments in existence. There's a map in here that's good for all territory outside of the Iron Curtain. And there's a bird in here which is controllable in azimuth 365 degrees. You pick out your destination on the map, you line up the bird with the destination, and all you do is follow the bird by virtue of this foresight. And if you get it in bad weather, you can clear your way with this windshield wiper.
This was the 17th year Ray flew up from Texas in La Chuparosa for the Experimental Aircraft Association convention. Now he's retiring the plane, and it'll be placed in the association's museum near Milwaukee. It was World War II, and everything was for real. The guns, the bombs, the enemy. Those who took off didn't always come back. Many pilots who started flying then continued after people stopped shooting at them. Some had a particular fascination for warplanes and formed the Warbirds of America, part of the EAA. Today, the guns aren't real, but the planes are. And not all the members are veterans. Jeff Perkins, Richmond, Virginia.
Warbirds of America, for the most part, you'll find are extremely intelligent, successful people who are fulfilling a very expensive sort of hobby with themselves. They are an unusual cross-section from very sedate and quiet, such as doctors, to real wild men. When I was a little kid, somewhere along the line, I got interested in World War II aircraft and warbirds. I was born during World War II. I've seen all the movies and read all the books, and there's a certain thrill. It is one of the most exhilarating things in the world to be flying in a high-performance warbird as compared to a civilian aircraft. It's like the difference between driving a Chevrolet Impala station wagon and a Ferrari. It's a lot more exhilarating driving a Ferrari. A warbird is built to be responsive. It was built for combat for the most part, and it gives you a lot of response, but it's less forgiving than a civilian aircraft. If you're not proficient, you can get yourself killed. The limits are more narrow. The plane says you've got to stay on top of things. But they're safe if they're flown. If you stay proficient, you stay within the limits of your own abilities in the airplanes, you're not going to get hurt. They're good airplanes. They're solid. They'll also take a lot more than a civilian aircraft. They're stressed for very high G loading, where a civilian aircraft is stressed for half or a third of that. So you're really safer. You know, we all have our identity crises, and, you know, so people wear patches and things like this. This is sort of advertising. This is where I've been. This is what I'm into. There's some functionality to it. There's some ego to it. There's some just, you know, the peacock effect. You know, let me show you my colors. We can't really talk practicality when we talk about warbirds. True, if you have a 51, you can go faster than just about any other civilian propeller-driven airplane, but you're going to burn considerably more fuel. But when you arrive, people certainly know you're there.
The guys who fly warbirds weren't usually pilots in the war, though many served. Bob Hoover from El Segundo, California, isn't a warbird, but he saw plenty of action with the 52nd Fighter Group in Sicily and Corsica. He was captured after being shot down on his 59th mission.
Okay, I was flying a Spitfire, the Mark V, Model 5 of the Spitfire series. There were a great many numbers of Spits, and I was on my 59th mission and fighting over the Mediterranean Sea, operating out of the island of Corsica, right off the beach there. And the missions were harassment, dive bombing, and that sort of thing, nuisance-type raids. And on this particular mission, we were jumped by 6 Focke-Wulf 190s. And quite naturally, a dogfight ensued. And in an effort to save one of the members of my flight, why, I got in behind a couple of airplanes to shoot one off of his tail. Even though I was a cripple myself, I had a belly tank which I couldn't release, which is really a big drag item on an airplane of that type. So it meant that I couldn't go nearly as fast as the enemy airplanes. Spitfire had a tight turning radius, and you could just rack it into a tight turn. And if you knew your enemy's airplanes and their characteristics, you could wait until they would get almost within firing range, and then you'd brake, and they'd slip right on by you just like that. So I played that to my advantage for 20 minutes or so, I would guess, until finally what we call a sleeper got me a high deflection shot. It's either great skill or extremely lucky.
The biplane on final is clear to land. Biplane on final, clear to
Little
land.
Whitman Field in Oshkosh had to gear up for more than 60,000 takeoffs and landings during the week the flying buffs came to town. That's more traffic each day than in an average month. Russ Lincoln is the tower chief.
Normally we would run somewhere in the vicinity of 400 takeoffs and landings per day total. And during the convention we have run as many as 15,000 per day. This would be a 16-hour day, so we're talking about 1,000 operations per hour roughly. That would be the peak traffic.
White and we're on Aztec. Roger, give me a call on the water tower with your call on type, please.
Taxi north until you reach...
41 Yankee, Roger. Keep it down in tight, and I'll have a sequence for you by the base. And no numbers, gentlemen, just color and type. No numbers, gentlemen, just color and type. And when you get around the ground, as soon as feasible, left turn into the grass, watch the flagman for pilot.
The Messerschmitt has to have 2/7 color wind.
Okay.
We don't have to have the greatest controllers in the world from a controllability standpoint. We're primarily interested in how, if they do a good job at their home facility and they're dependable and they get along with their peers. This is very important. When you bring in strange people, strange to each other, put them in a group like this where the job pressure is very high. They have to work well together.
Looks like yellow or green Cessna on the right base. Make short approach at clear to land. Cherokee, that is an air coupe, by the way, and you can start your final now, Cherokee. And air coupe, start your final. Keep it in close, please, behind the Cessna.
There's no such thing as routine, and a lot of people shy away from routine jobs, and I think this is true of air traffic controllers. There is no routine in air traffic control. It takes a certain breed of cat to be a controller, and they've got to love it or they won't do it. You either love it or you get out. It is high pressure. There's no doubt about that. You're not dealing with tangible items like an airplane is not an airplane to a controller. It's an airplane as far as getting them on the ground, but there's humans in it, there's bodies in it, and we don't want them hurt any more than anybody else does.
The easiest part of the air controller's day is the most exciting for just about everyone else. That's when the aerobatic show happens. Each day the pilots meet for a briefing before the show.
All right, the show is going to open with the Warbirds. It's going to be primarily T6s. The encircling Steve Duell today will be Wayne Pierce in the Stearman. There's going to be a couple minor changes in this order. Again, we'll give that to you before the start, and along with the total...
Flying aerobatics isn't cheap in either time or money. A paint job can cost thousands. A blown engine, thousands more. Just to break even, aerobatic pilots have to get paid well. But Oshkosh is special, and they fly every year for no money.
Bob Lyjak, Dwayne Cole, Bob Herendeen, and he'll be flying the Eagle, and Dick Blair and Art Scholl. Anyone have any questions? Fueling, where's Hubie? Okay, get the Hubie on your fuel and oil requirements. Again, the airplane's down there by 3 o'clock, no smoking on the line, and down to a minimum on people. What else can I tell you?
Debbie Gary of Monterey, California is an aerobatic pilot.
See, it's between 3 and 4.
Why do people come to watch Debbie? She hopes it's not because she's a woman. but because she has her own style of flying. Why does she fly?
I do it because there's a great challenge to it. It's probably the most exciting type of flying that there is, and it's very beautiful. It's showmanship on the ground and in the air both. When you design your routine, you put a bit of showmanship into it. You know, a round maneuver next to a straight maneuver, a fast maneuver next to a slow maneuver, and so there's a lot of creativity in it, a lot of choreography, and I always say that it's like ballet and gymnastics. It's very equivalent to that. We have exact times that we begin our routines, so we've got a plan, and then when we go out there, it's actually a lot of physical work because there are a lot of G-forces exerted on you, and your body's tensing against them. Or in order to make the maneuvers look crispy, you really go whap with the stick. It's very exciting. You put a lot of energy into it and get a lot of energy back. I get a lot of energy from having done it well, if I've done it well, and I get a lot of energy from the crowd reaction. I love the crowd. You know, one of the reasons for doing it is because it does require a lot of skill and a lot of concentration, and therefore you grow, you know, through learning and trying. But I also like the fact that people come up and they say, you know, I've always wanted to do that. Now that I've seen you do it, I know that I can. And, I had a man come up to me and said, the girls in my phys ed class were inspired by you. They thought, well, if you can go out and do that sport, flying, well, then I can go out and win this competition on the ground.
On the takeoff roll right now. So on the left, coming from the left to the right, is the one and only Ed Mahler in the men in special from Pittstown, New Jersey, rolling all the way around in a full slow roll on takeoff.
Sonny Everett does the announcing for Big Ed Mahler. One of the unique aspects of Ed's act that Sonny points out to the crowd is that the smoke that trails behind his PJ 295 smells like his sponsor's aftershave.
Men in skin bracer aftershave. Big Ed Mahler in the men in special. Pulling back now on the stick, going straight up, and up some more, straight on up, and he kicks it around in a hammerhead turn right up there, and he'll come right straight back down into the center of the aerobatic area. Big Ed Mahler from Pittstown, New Jersey, flying the men in special, designed by Mr. Nick Diapuzzo of Langhorne, Pennsylvania, one of the charter members of EAA. Big Ed now coming back on the stick for an inside loop, and right up there it's a snap roll on top of a loop, holding it upside down for just a moment or two, pulling back on the stick and coming right back down through the center of the aerobatic area. Ed Mahler owns and operates Ed Mahler Aviation out in Pittstown, New Jersey. Big Ed now going straight up, giving you a good look at a hammerhead down there to the left side. And as he kicks it around, he'll come right straight back down, and this time do a quarter roll to line up once again with the center of the air show area. Bring it right down there, and he rolls the airplane. There's 1 and 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. An 8-point hesitation roll, cutting the 4-point in half or doubling up on it and doing the 8-point hesitation roll. Rolling the airplane around halfway as he goes straight up into the sky. This time he'll pull back and convert that altitude into airspeed. Almost slowed down and completely stopped at the top, and he'll come right straight down and convert that altitude into airspeed. Big Ed Mahler coming right through show center now, and he rolls it over on knife edge flight, and it says, "Thanks, I needed that," up on the top of the top wing. It's probably going to come back around now and land. You may have seen him on the ABC's, or excuse me, CBS's Mike Douglas show.
They fly aerobatics all over the world, as French national champion Daniel Elegon will agree. And they do it for the same reason.
I love it. I flew since I'm born. I'm retired from the French Air Force, and now I'm close to 6,000 hours flying and 4,000 in a jet. And on this aircraft, particularly about 2,500 hours on this aircraft. I flew the prototype in 1968. I did all the flight tests, and I really know this aircraft by heart.
The next maneuver will be the heligoing circle. It's my personal maneuver. But now I dive to take a lot of airspeed to have enough to do a 360-degree turn like you are going to see. Now I'm level off, roll a quarter roll to the right and push over right away 4 Gs and a half. All my blood in the head and very hard. Believe me, it seems for me very, very long. When I see the runway coming back after 360 degrees, I'm very happy to roll out. Now it will be my last presentation, come back to the crowd for the landing. So I have to do my peel-off, that's another hammerhead to come back. Okay, now coming back with a crosswind, I can see I have to roll into the wind. Peel up about 180 mph, snap 4 or 5 Gs, and then I was supposed to land and I go to the next runway.
Bob Hoover arrived at Oshkosh shortly after his reputation. One reason is the way he maneuvers a Rockwell Commander.
It's a unique airplane for the type of flying that I'm doing with it. And the purpose of the kind of flying I'm doing is to instill confidence in people, to make them appreciate that the airplane is safe, and that if one has a problem, for instance, if you lost an engine, there's no reason to panic or get all concerned about it if you know what to do. Most people have a tendency to think, well, if I lost both engines, I would really be in serious trouble. So to demonstrate that that isn't necessarily the case, I call it energy management. I shut off both engines with sufficient altitude to trade into airspeed, and with that airspeed, I managed to accomplish 2 loops, a 360-degree roll, a 180-degree turn, several side slips, and a one-wheel landing, and stopped the airplane, parking it on the ramp at the location where I'd taxied out from for the flight initially. The airplane is spectacular, just absolutely spectacular. I'm converting the altitude into airspeed, the airspeed back into altitude, and then trading it off again, and that's how you can manage all of those maneuvers without the power. But I guess I don't mean to be immodest, but it is a somewhat difficult maneuver because each and every airshow location is different. The weather conditions are always different, and you have to put in a little factor for wind, a little extra airspeed here or there, or take it off as necessary in order to arrive at that particular point. And it's sort of a standing comment with the narrators who narrate for me on who owes who a quarter as to whether I'm going to make it back to the ramp exactly where I started from. Every now and then the wind's just too strong, and I can't quite get back to that location.
The annual convention of the EAA, where all of the members have a very deep interest in flying, and almost all of them are pilots. Therefore, when you perform before these people, you normally attempt to do your best in one sense, because now you have a very knowledgeable audience. And so, to a certain degree, it is a very special type of air show. I'm sure to all of the pilots who perform there, it's a unique collection of people to see at times 35 or 40,000 people who themselves fly and yet sit in the sun, looking up into the sun to watch others fly.
Sandy Pierce, Sebring, Florida.
I do it because it's one of the things I do best in life, and I enjoy the lifestyle. I have a lot of freedom in my work, and I enjoy it. Basically what I do is on the ground, climb up on top of the airplane. I get on one step and then work my way up to the top of the airplane, and I take off attached to the top of the airplane and fly through a series of aerobatics. I have a seat belt on. I have to be. I would fall off. There's really nobody that's crawling around upside down on an airplane without being attached, because you would fall off. So I have a seat belt. I have nothing on my feet, so when we fly upside down, my feet kind of float around. Probably the question I'm asked most is, how do you breathe up there? It's very, very simple. You just breathe normally.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Canadian Snowbirds. There's a reason why most of us take flights, and the folks who came to Oshkosh make flights. Maybe it's a question of money or opportunity, or maybe it's something else. Bob Lyjak said it best.
We live in a very modern, complicated society today, where my feeling is that the individual is somehow lost in it, in the organization of the complicated networks that we have. When I'm diving an airplane straight down at the ground at 160 miles an hour, the question whether I will live or die is completely in my hands, at least 95% in my hands. I think today in our society it's very difficult for an individual to feel that in some way he controls his own destiny. No one asks for a vote, a show of hands. There need not be any consensus of opinion by a committee. I have sufficient self-confidence in my own ability that if I want to live, I feel that I can live. People normally would speak of it as freedom. Well, what they mean is three-dimensional freedom. I'm talking about even something beyond that. It's freedoms of decisions, that you make the decisions for yourself, and there's only you and the airplane involved, and it feels good in that way.
This program was made possible in part by grants from the Miles Kimball Company, the Wisconsin National Life Insurance Company, the Wisconsin Educational Television Network, and KWSU-TV, Pullman, Washington.